All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. So excited for tonight. I would love to find out where you are coming from. We already have a number of chatters tonight. We have folks from Texas and Michigan and all over the place. So I'd love to know where you are from, whether you are watching live with me or if you're watching the replay, welcome as well. Please leave a comment below and let me know where you're coming from. I love doing these live streams because it's such a fun chance to talk to our community a little bit more in person. With the podcast, it's like I love being in your ear, but I also love a chance to have a little bit of a back and forth as well. Hello, Stacy in Central Florida, Alyssa, who of course is from Illinois, Annalise from North Carolina, Tina from New Hampshire. Oh, so fun. Yay. I was like, was anybody going to come tonight? Carolina, Minnesota. Chupa from Canada, yay! Donna from Denver, Dega from Redlands, California, Natalie from Ontario, Evelyn from California. Awesome. Thank you guys for being here tonight. Hopefully the audio is better this time than last time. I decided to stay here at my desk and do a little presentation for you. And I am just so excited for tonight. The context here is that on June 3rd, I am teaching my Before Your Story album workshop yet again. It's been 2 years, I think, since I taught it live last, and I first taught it way back in 2014, and I even started the project back in 2013, which in the scrapbooking world is so long ago when it comes to supplies. Oh gosh, we also have Tiffany from St. Louis, Wendy in Australia, Barbara from Tennessee, Amy's also from Michigan, Silver Spring, Maryland. Awesome, yay, okay. So there's gonna be 2 things that we do tonight. The first one is I have this little mini training for you on how to create a timeline of your life. And this is really the first step, the first lesson in our class is creating this timeline. It is your starting point. But I'm going to share some other reasons why you might want to create this timeline as well, whether or not you do this project. But I'm hoping to inspire you to dive in and capture your growing up story with this timeline. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to break things down and how timelines and categories and all these fun techniques that we use really help make big projects, ones that seem big in our heads, make them even easier. And so what we're going to do second is then I'm going to share our brand new updated supply list. My original album is 12 by 12 with a lot of different sizes of page protectors. And back then there was a lot more availability of project life kits, pocket page cards. We still have those, but they're often in subscriptions and not in larger quantities. So I have a brand new supply list for you. And I'm working on a second album. I'm working on my husband's album this year in a different size. And so I'm going to share a bunch of different album sizes that you can consider, and all the supplies are updated for what's available today. And so we'll talk through some of those changes, and you know, what's more fun than looking at a bunch of scrapbook supplies. So we're going to do that second tonight. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, anytime if you have any questions, let me know. I will be monitoring the chat as best as I can here. And of course, this will be recorded. And if you're watching in the recording, thank you for spending some time with us. But a big, huge welcome to all of those who are watching live. Yay. I love seeing the chat just start to fly by. Okay. So we'll see how long this takes. The training portion is actually pretty short. And I think that might be surprising because this idea of creating a timeline of your life seems like it's so big, but it's actually pretty easy. So let's jump into it. Okay. So here we go over here. So why do we even want to create a timeline? And actually, here we go. Sorry about that. This is my first time using this little setup here. So the first thing I need you to do is actually to gather some supplies. You need a piece of paper larger is better. If you have a big piece of paper, that's great, but just a normal piece of paper is really handy. And then something to write with, a pen, a pencil, or a marker. If you are super digital savvy, you can use your favorite digital device. You could use your tablet and your digital pencil with it if you like, but pen and paper, pencil and paper, whatever you can do there, because I'm going to have you drawing and writing some things down. Excuse me, I need to cough. All right. Okay, now here's the why. So, why do we want to bother making a timeline? You know, as we're all getting older, with every day we get a little older, and I think having major dates recorded is so handy. I don't know how many times I've asked my mom, well, what year was this and what year was this? And she actually has everything recorded, and I was able to get so many of the dates that I wanted for my project from her because she recorded it. So just having these kind of big picture dates written down for your life and maybe even your life going forward is just so important as a reference. You know, we keep all kinds of other life references, you know, lists of doctors and the veterinarian, and we keep lots of scrapbooking project ideas, but where do we keep those essential facts about our life? And if you do family history, you may be even gathering a lot of these facts about your ancestors' lives, but what about your life right now? So having this timeline document, however you create it, is just so handy for making sure you have these dates in one place. It's also helpful for finding album gaps. If you are creating pages over time, you might find that you lean towards certain periods of time. Maybe that's when you had more photos. But when you look at, here's some of the major milestones, here's some of the major kind of sections of my life, major phases, or we call them seasons of life a lot around here. When you look at that, you're able to identify, oh, well, I haven't scrapped very much about that. Or maybe I need to go look, did I ever tell that story? So having this timeline can be kind of a high-level checklist and a cue to help you dive in to some of the projects that you want to create in the future. And of course, it's also so handy if you want to tell a really big story. And I'm going to share exactly why and how we're going to use it for this project. Okay, so do you have your pieces of paper? Please leave a comment in the chat if you do. And the first step that I want you to do is to draw a horizontal line across the page. This is, of course, our starting point for our timeline. If you have your paper, and I want you to orient it in a landscape way so you have plenty of horizontal space, that makes it a little bit easier. All right. Amy's all ready to go. Hey, Bree, welcome. Welcome, Susan and Monica. Carol, we have a lot of our members here tonight. That's so awesome. Thank you guys for your support. All right, you guys are all ready to go. Let's draw that horizontal line across the page. You might want to make it, you know, thick so it stands out like mine. All right, now, this is the easy part. Add your birth year to the left-hand side. I mean, this is probably the part you could have done by yourself. Add your birth year. I'm admitting this is how old I am. Some of you think that's really young and some of you think that's really old, but that's my birth year. You do not need a ruler. Please do not, you don't need a ruler. This isn't something to frame and put on your wall. This is a starting point. At some point in the future, you might want to transcribe this, but this is your chicken scratch, your brainstorm, your just kind of get everything out of your head and start kind of creating some sections of your life. So don't try to make it pretty or make it perfect. We're not putting stickers on it. This is just the starting point. Okay. So after you've done that, now I want you to think of the end point here. I want you to pick a year of a major milestone in your life. Now, right now, you might want to list a couple different choices. This could be the birth of your first child, the birth of your last child, This could be when you got married. It could be when you got divorced. It could be any kind of major life change that marks the end of the span of time that you might like to document. And I actually added 2020 on here as one option, just from the point that I was thinking today that at some point we're going to look back on this time and think about life before COVID-19. And it sounds like, in some form it's going to stick around with us for a while. And so, your birth to 2020 might be a period of time in which you want to document. It just depends on how you feel about that. But for most of us, it's going to be some sort of personal life event, a really significant move. It could be even, a tragedy or something, less positive in our lives. That is a major, major milestone that you want to consider an endpoint for your project. Now, I chose the birth of my daughter in 2011 because my kind of philosophy behind this project was before your story, as in her story, before your story, there was mine. There was my story. And so my album is written in a perspective of to my daughter to tell her my story. And so that's why I chose her birth. So for my husband's album, we're actually choosing 2008 at the end as the end point, and that's when we got married. And we're doing that because I don't have a lot of documentation from before I became part of the picture, but I have scrapbooked everything after that. So it didn't really make sense to choose another time period other than 2008 for his album. So that's what we're going to go on. So it looks like Monica here is going with her marriage. Shoe Puff, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, is choosing 2020 because that's when she really started scrapbooking. That's awesome. Yeah, this idea, if your scrapbooking start date, whatever that was, maybe it was the date of your first creative memories party. Maybe that's the milestone because you want to capture everything before that so you can feel more caught up. Alyssa's doing her career, and she says she modified the dates to be when I started my first job in libraries, and then 22 because that will be my 20th anniversary. Oh, that's so fun. Shuwen, okay, awesome, thank you. Carol, there's so many considerations. I can see why marriage would be appropriate, but also birth of first child, also birth of last child, which to choose. So in that case, if you really feel connected and resonant to different dates, think about which of those periods in the middle you have mostly documented. And it's not necessarily even when you became a scrapbooker, but when have you dipped back in? Or are there other types of projects that you really feel connected and committed to doing? So taking the example of my husband's album, if we went with the birth of his first son, which was 1991, that's my stepson, and he just turned 30 this year. And if we went up until his birth, there would be that period from 1991 to 2008 that we would really want to commit to doing basically a whole nother project on. And we certainly could, but it didn't necessarily feel feasible in the moment. But let's just say you're talking about the birth of your first child, and if you have all the supplies and you really feel committed to creating something from the birth of that child to, say, the birth of the last one, then maybe you don't include that in your album. So, but for now, you can pencil in a couple different dates on the right-hand side as options. And then as we go through this, it might become more clear which one that you'll pick. All right. So Becky is doing birth to marriage. Ileana's doing considering pre-pandemic, considering up to her 50th birthday, but since that's a long time, she's sticking with her first child. Toby is doing 1983 up until her second marriage. Carol Ann's doing from her marriage to first adoption. That's awesome. Jennifer's doing either 1997 when she met her husband or 1999 when she married him. When I would determine, Jennifer, based on that, have you documented that 2-year period? And do you want to do that in a separate, different way? Or do you want to include that as part of this album? Melissa's doing birth to meeting her husband. Deborah already has some albums in progress. Childhood goes through high school, college years, law school, and adulting from law school to present. I love that. You are well on your way. And doing birth to marriage, but she turns 50, so it'd be fun to do each decade. Yeah, that could be a really fun approach to it as well. And one of the album sizes I'm going to be talking about is 6x8. And so if you are thinking of maybe a smaller span of time, a smaller format might fit well with that, just depending on your scrapbooking preferences. Tina says, since I started scrapping when my kids were already teens, I'm thinking of doing my pre-scrapping family documentation. Karen has noted many of her options for her long, awesome life. Oh my gosh. Okay. Iris is here. She is thinking about doing birth till college graduation. Stacia, perhaps birth to immediate ex-husband. I just love that you guys are really thinking about this and considering all your different options and also what you've already documented as part of that. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing just so willingly here. Okay, let's go into the next section. Now, what I want you to do is to add any major moves. Now, for some of you, there may be a lot of moves. For some, might be only one major move. But to think about the places which you made a significant change of location. On this example here, I didn't share when I kind of made some smaller moves. I shared some of my bigger, more significant moves when my family moved to Texas in 1989, and then when I moved to Illinois in 2008. I had some smaller moves within that, moving house, moving across town, but they didn't really feel like they had the same weight as these major moves. Now, if you were a military family, maybe you moved all the time. Maybe it was when you stopped moving. Maybe that's the item on the list that you need to add there. So I'm going to share, I think, 3 or 4 different categories of items to think about and add to your list here. And this one is the first one. And feel free to add as much as what comes to mind, because again, this is your chicken scratch, your initial rough cut at a timeline. It's not supposed to be pretty. It's just supposed to be, let's draw arrows, let's write some things, and scratch some dates down. And at the very end of this, I will actually show you my very first timeline that I created in 2013 when I was planning this project. So Bree says that I left DC the year that she arrived. And Iris says that I have a bunch of gorgeous black and white Felicity Jane 6x8 albums, and I never scrap 6x8. So I've decided those will be the ones for this project. Oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I think 6x8 is a really fun option. There are some considerations, and we'll share that. So, oh, it looks like Toby had a big move in the 70s. All right. Okay. So you thought about your moves. Now let's think about any of your major education milestones. So I included kindergarten, high school graduation, and college graduation here. You might have 5th grade graduation or 8th grade graduation on here as well. You might have law school graduation or medical school graduation or end of, your internship or whatever type of thing that you had in your career that was a major significant transition from one phase of your life to another. I think these obviously are going to vary from person to person. And you might also think about someone else's education milestone if that was a big impact in your life. I have to think about, I remember, I don't know why, but some of my most vivid memories of the mid-'80s were when my mom was going back to school for her master's, and my dad wasn't babysitting, he was fathering, he was parenting, but my dad was in charge many nights of the week, and we would do goofy things, and he'd make pizza, and it was, just this casual thing. because mom wasn't around running the show. And so maybe her graduation could have been something on this as well, because that marked another transition in her life when she then graduated and then went back to the workforce after staying home with me for a few years. All right, do we have our educational milestones documented here? And one thing that I want to say is that if you don't know a year, don't stress about it right now. Put a little tilde sign and say about this year. You can go back, and if you have documentation or you do have people you can ask, or you can figure it out using some other context clues, you can add the real date later or put question mark after it. Just put something in there as a placeholder for what it is, because it's more about the relationship between the dates, what was before and what was after, than getting the dates absolutely perfect. That's so much less important here, and you'll see why in a couple more slides when we start breaking it up a little bit. Okay, next one, add any major travel. Sometimes the trips we take change us. Sometimes they become these huge memory points of you kind of remember it was before or after that. Particularly if it was a really significant trip, if it was memorable. You know, when I looked at my other timeline, I realized that I had 2 different Disney trips that I had added to my original one, and I saw that after I had made this example here. So it could be, you know, special international travel, but it could be going to special places like Disney or the Grand Canyon or that big family Route 66 road trip. Things that really stand out in your mind as, you know, something that felt significant at the time, because even though you're a kid, some of these, you know, everyday things can feel even more significant when you look back on them. So major travel is another option here. Okay. And other thing to remember is that over time you can add more to this, but the point is to get some of these high points, so then we can take this big span of time and break it up into smaller chunks, and that's where we're headed here. But we have one more category, and that's to add any other big events that just really felt significant. So in 1984, my parents built a house, and then in 2004, I started my first real job after grad school. Bree says her parents divorced. That would be another really significant event. If your timeline is goes up to post-children, the birth of a child, you know, the death of a significant family member, those types of things, birth, death, marriage, divorce, those could be significant events on your timeline as well. My husband's been working on his timeline. He included the birth of his first niece, but not the other ones. It's kind of interesting. But that was something that stood out to him, is when his older sister had her first child, because I'm sure that changed the family dynamic and who was, you know, how the relationships were and how things were going. Carol Ann, birth of siblings, you know, as an only child, I didn't even think about that, so that's so funny. So yeah, Tiffany and Deborah both suggested birth of siblings as another great thing to add here. Carol Ann suggested buying a house, selling a house, getting pets, cats, dogs, you know, even the passing away of a really significant pet in your life. Those could be other big points on your timeline. The more things that you can think of, the more clues and cues you're going to have to brainstorm some of the stories of your life as you fill in the details. So our whole perspective on this project is going from this 10,000 foot view, and that's our timeline, and trying to break that down to individual photo and story pairs. And our whole album is based on these photo and story pairs. And it's really a story plus visual pair. We're really going story first here because going through all of your photos and trying to pick the best ones is hard. And we want to make this project finishable. So we go from this 10,000 foot view down to individual stories that you want to include. And I walk you through a bunch of different worksheets and planning tools to go more and more granular from this big picture view until you get down to the pocket level of here's the photo and here's the story that I'm telling. All right, another good example, Deborah, starting a sport you stuck with through childhood. Yeah, or maybe if your sporting thing went to nationals somewhere, that would be another big event. So many different things. Maybe there was an accident or something that had a major timeline. Maybe it's even like world news types things. Those are some things that are really fun to include in this type of album. I've included some in other albums of mine, but you might want to offer those as context in the album of like, this is what was going on in the world around these same times. Particularly if something really stands out as just this pivotal thing. You know, the way we're going to look back on COVID-19, I think, is, you know, there was life, there was before, and there was after, and there's certainly other milestones in life that were like that as well. All right, lots of great ideas here. Thank you, guys. Okay, so we're doing this because we need to then create spans of significance. So I want you to look at your timeline, all the chicken scratch. Toby says that she's filling up her page because there's so many different things. That's great. That's awesome. I just wanted you to start bubbling up with ideas and getting them off the page. And now what I want you to do is look at your timeline and think about how can you draw about 4 lines. Between 3 and 6. I want you to create sections of life that make sense. Things that you can say, these are the things that we did in this time period. And they may have been different, but they were kind of, you can group them together. So let me share my groups to help you here. So we have 1980 to 1985. So those are really the pre-school age years, and we mostly lived in one place. You know, we did build a house in 1984 and we moved, but really this was like, you know, Jennifer at home with mom doing, you know, little kid things, playing with stuffed animals and all the little thing, you know, the baby, toddler, early childhood years. And then 1985 to 1989 are school years when we lived in Michigan. And then 1989 to 1998, that was, you know, the bulk of my school years but all of those were in Texas. And our life in Michigan and our life in Texas are very, very different. We lived in Michigan and we lived in a small town in Southwest Michigan, very rural, small community. And then we moved to Houston, and I went to a much bigger school with much different climate and very different people. And, you know, there were certainly transitions to that. So life was very, very different post 1989 for us. And then after high school, that's when I left the home. You know, that could even be when you moved out of your home, could be a dot on your timeline. And for many of us, that is coinciding with high school graduation, sometimes with college graduation. But then I have the college years, you know, very major developmental years. And then I have post-college up until when Emily was born. So that was the rest of my 20s, the figuring out yourself and your life years, up until 31. And so I have, you know, 5 major sections there. For most people, you usually can come up with about 5 sections. I know some of you are very wise in your years, and so you may have more sections, and that's okay. There's really no constraint. It's just helping you break things down so that you can then brainstorm what are the things that happened to me in this particular span of significance or this season of my life. You don't have to go super granular because in the end, you're only going to be able to pick a finite number of stories. Otherwise our albums would be 100 pages long, and we can't do that. So, but if you can pick these 5 categories, that's usually enough. For these 5 spans, that's usually enough to help nudge you along and start kind of bubbling up even more of these stories. All right, so we got some questions here. Would it work to split things up based on category versus chronology? Family stories, school stories, friend stories. Okay, so I guess just to give you a little bit of a preview here, inside of the album and in the worksheets that I share for you, we are going to have 4 major categories. And these are corresponding to Stacey Julian's Library of Memories categories. So I've twisted them to apply to one person. And, you know, my examples here are about me. So there's all about me, which is kind of my personality things. There's things I've done. So, you know, education accomplishments, people I love or I have loved. That's more self-evident, and places I've been. And so we use those categories as a lens to brainstorm. So we take, for example, the school age years in Michigan, and then we brainstorm stories within each of those 4 categories. And then I have lots of storytelling prompts and examples to help you, to ask you even more questions, to brainstorm further. And I walk you through it step by step. So we start with this timeline, and then there's a worksheet for every single step along the way, leading you to, you know, this photo and story pair. Yes, so you definitely, Deborah, you're on the right way with categories. We're using chronology first because that's the way our brains think. But in order to tell a story that feels complete, while we know there's stuff that we can't include, we cannot include everything, it's impossible. In order to get this project finished, using the categories is so beautiful to help you just paint this picture of your life and what's important to you over the span of time. So yeah, you're definitely on the right track. So thank you for bringing that up. All right. Okay. So do we have divisions? Are you feeling comfortable with 5, like 4 lines, 5 divisions? Is that something that is working out for you? Are you feeling like you have more or less? All right. Toby says hers is getting larger. That's okay. It's okay. This is let your brain just go where it wants to go, jot things down, and then we'll organize it more later. This is just a wonderful first step to get you excited about the story aspect, and then next I'm going to get you excited about the product aspect, because it's the 2 of those together that leads to a finished project. You got to be excited about capturing this story, because that's the underlying why, the underlying motivation. And then you got to be excited about playing with product and making fun and pretty things, because that's why we're scrapbookers. And it's when the 2 of those coincide that you can really get an amazing project finished. All right, lots of divisions here. 5 is working well for Iris. Toby's taking screenshots. This is being recorded, so don't worry about that. You can jump back later if you need to. Monica is largely based on school changes. I think for a lot of people that will be the case. Karen's asking, when you tell this chronology, do you ever go back and insert pages you've done in the past as a step in the story? Not so much in the way that you're sharing it, but what I have done myself and have had others do is that if you then later create a page that fits in the album, that like this, you think that, gosh, this really fits in this album, it doesn't really fit anywhere else, I've then added that to the album. And what I will encourage, probably the number one thing that I say again and again throughout the class is, if you have additional ideas beyond your overall structure, like once we have your plan, if you get additional ideas along the way, and you probably will, write those down. But you're not making those things right now. You have to pick, this is what I've chosen, and do that, and get this project finished, and then save all those other things for later if you want to make something else. Because if you keep letting those things creep in, you're not going to finish. And our goal here is for you to tackle this and finish it. All right, Caroline says 1993 was the year from hell and needs 4 divisions itself. And maybe 1993 needs to be pulled out. Maybe that's its own photo book or traveler's notebook journal or something to help you feel like that is captured. And particularly smaller projects like that, you could even put those physically inside a larger album. Same with like memorabilia things. You can take memorabilia and stick it in a pocket, but if you have a little traveler's notebook or a little mini book that you want to include because of something that was such a major transition for you, you could do a separate project and include that in later. All right, Jennifer has 6 divisions: early childhood, elementary, middle school, high school, college, and adult. That sounds perfect. Hopefully our internet's still good. My looks like YouTube saying we're a little glitchy, but hopefully it's not too bad here. All right. Carol has four sections. Sounds good. Okay. Let me share a couple more things here. So this is so fun. I love this. I'm so glad that I took a picture of it. This is my original timeline when I decided that I wanted to do this book. I just sat down and I wrote down every single year between 1980 and 2011 and started just brain dumping of what came to mind for me. And you'll notice for 1997, Titanic came out and I saw it 8 times in the theater. And I don't even recall if that ended up in my album, but when I sat down, that was one of the things that came out to go on my timeline. It was just kind of in this brain dump, here's what stood out for me. My first boyfriend as well. He also didn't appear in the album because he didn't make the top 16 people I've loved. Yeah, this is just so fun, and this was the impetus for this whole class. All right. Alyssa says, does it matter how long the divisions are? No, not really. In an ideal world, they would be the same length. But that's not how our lives work. It's more about having groupings of time in which things are kind of the same, in which you can say these days, the way we talk about week in the life, like these days, these are the types of things that were happening. And having those boundaries when you think about, okay, what was life like for me in high school? Lots of things will start coming up, but you need to have some sort of boundary to put on your brainstorming so that your brain knows which direction to go when it can butt up against those walls. And then, of course, the end result here is an album. And this album is heavily pocket page oriented, but there are different options if you don't like pocket pages. I will say that I would encourage you to go the direction of digital, Project Life app, or photo book if you don't want to do physical pockets, because I don't encourage you to do this album with full layouts. And that's only because I don't think it's possible to tell as many stories as you'd want to tell in an album of all layouts and still finish the project. As I've reiterated, I really want you to be able to finish. And so having strategies to do that is how I've organized the class, to help you get to the point of getting these stories out of your head onto cards, whether that's handwritten or typed, however you want to do it, but making it an album of, say, 80 stories and 80 layouts isn't really feasible in a 6-week time period. But in this structure, it is super feasible. So I just want to kind of give you that context going in. All right, if you go to simplescrapper.com/story, if you've not been there yet, that's where I have all the details about the class. And I'm going to bring that up really quick here. All right, so we should be able to go right here. So this is the page where you can learn more about the class. I have this little preview video here. It's just 1 minute, and this is really kind of my motivation for the class. really just talking about how this takes this one big story, your timeline, your start to finish, and helps you simplify it. And we use a number of different page styles, and you'll see some of that when I jump over to the supply list, a number of different page styles to make that happen. All right. Inside the class, which starts June 3rd and goes for 6 weeks, we're going to have 6 different 2-hour co-working sessions, so like 12 hours of dedicated time for you to show up. I'm going to sit there with you. I'm going to answer your questions if you have them, but it's really, I'm holding the space for you to do the work and create your project. And I think between that and the motivation you'll get in between, there's going to be plenty of time to actually get this done. It's a very doable project when you follow the steps and really focus on it, and it's so rewarding in the end. And of course, we have a full classroom. There's video demonstrations, worksheets, a brand new workbook that I'm creating. As I mentioned before, I first taught this class in 2014, and this year really is the first major update. I've done little tweaks here and there, but this year I'm kind of overhauling the structure a little bit to make it even easier for you. And of course, you'll have the full support of all your fellow students. Obviously, we've had so much support even just here tonight, and it'll be a lot like that. But on Zoom, you'll have that face-to-face interaction, being able to ask questions and share experiences, and yeah, it's just going to be so awesome. All right, and before I jump over to the supply list, I just wanted to share that we are starting in 15 days from today, so it's time to kind of make a decision. If you're already a member, you're already invited, but if you're not yet a member, I have a special pricing offer for you right now, where you can join us inside the membership for no commitment for $49. So that means you get 3 months inside the membership. You get to take the class with us, get all the live sessions. You get to download the materials and take them with you if you like. And that's for $49. And if you're already like, I've been waiting for a reason to become a member, you can click this link below and also become an annual member instead. That saves you a little bit of money, and that just puts you part of the family to do all the other fun things that we're going to do this year, including the finishing project, several more retreats. We've got a full calendar still yet to come in the second half of the year. But if you're not sure yet, then that $49 is one of the best deals we'll have this year. Okay, is there a way to access the class from 2 years ago, or is the content pretty much the same but updated? So the answer is the content's pretty much the same but updated. I'm currently updating the class. We actually just closed down the old classroom today, and the new classroom will go up on June 3rd. So I've been working on the content. Now I need to just tidy things up and reshare them. It's the same overall approach, but I'm updating some of the teaching strategies to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more clear, some updated videos and worksheets for you as well. So no, you can't access the class from the past. You'll be able to access the updated classroom as of June 3rd if you were taking it before. My original album is definitely the core of the class, and then I'm also adding another album for my husband as both a second example, an example of how to tell someone else's story, and an example of how I would approach it basically if I was starting fresh today. Because the availability of supplies is a little bit different than it was back in 2013, and it's if I'd never done anything before, I might approach it a little bit differently, and this new version kind of gets at that while still being really true to the original structure. I'm a Simple Scrapper member. Do I need to purchase this class as well, or is it included in my membership? It is already included in your membership. Yes. Toby says even 2 years can bring big changes. That's for sure. Yes. Yeah, so if you're already a member, definitely, yeah, you don't need to do anything different. I do have a link in the bottom of any of the recent member emails where you can officially sign up. It's totally, no additional cost, but that puts you on the email list so that you get all the updates for the class. And the reason we do that is because the membership really is the thing that we offer here. We have this awesome membership community that does so many things throughout the year. We have bi-monthly retreats, bi-monthly member magazines, Spark. They're each 100 pages now. It's really amazing. Ad-free pages. And then, of course, we have, bi-monthly special training events. And this Before Your Story is really the biggest one of the year. It's the only kind of intensive 6-week class that I teach. And that's just because it is just such an amazing thing. And I tend to only do it every other year because of the all of the hoopla that goes around it, for sure. Ileana says, I have a ton of Project Life projects. Can I still use them? Yes, 100%. If you have stash, and particularly if you have old Project Life core kits, this is the perfect project to use some of those up. And so with that, I'm going to hop over to the supply list. So I know Alyssa's here tonight, and you've heard her on the podcast, but I want to thank her for helping me with the supply list today. She helped me kind of break down some of these numbers for you to make sure that we could have a variety of different album sizes. Okay, so what I have here for you, and this is also linked from this page, right back up here, was C-Class supply list. But it's just at simplescrapper.com/story-supplies. And I'll just type that in the chat box for you too, so that's recorded. And so in the first section, I'm sharing the supplies for my original 12x12 album. But I was doing this based on a collection that was released in 2013. And for a long time, there were a digital Project Life, a true digital collection, as in the papers and embellishments, more recently the Project Life app version, and then my album was based on a Project Life mini kit, which you cannot find anywhere anymore. And it was this beautiful cut and paste collection, one of Amy Tangerine's earlier collections. It was so fun, and you could even see that here in the background. It was just very everyday, a little bit of florals, polka dot stripes, just very, very classy. Classy, what a funny word. But it was just a really nice collection. And if you like that, I would recommend maybe going with the Project Life app version or the digital Project Life. And you can use those cards in a digital way, or you could even print them out. So I want to make sure you have that context of, if you're not finding the paper things that you want to use, and you are a little bit more digital handy, you can go the route of printing things out and then writing on them, or typing on the digital supplies and then printing those out as cards as well. So there's a lot of options here, and I'm happy to answer all your questions, but I kind of want to give you the overview. So for the 12x12, it has the most number of different page sizes. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, wow, I made it really interesting with all the different page sizes. And I think back then, it was much easier to get all of these different page styles on Amazon, because I'm almost certain that I purchased the majority of my supplies for this project from Amazon. And so I have a full list of all the different options here, different places, different sources for you depending on where you like to shop. But I will say the 12x12 version is the most complicated. I don't want to use that word. It's certainly not hard, but I use a lot of different page sizes to make it fun and interesting. And of course, the whole class walks you through which each type is for, how to set it up, what to put in each different pocket. But I will say that the other page sizes that I'm sharing here are a little bit simpler, and you might even want to kind of backfill to say, okay, I like your structure, Jennifer, I like your new structure, and I want to do it in 12x12, and I'm going to simplify it a little bit. So, and some of you have already asked me, can I do this and still tweak your format? Of course you can. This is a starting point if you want to follow along step by step, but there's a lot of different options to really make it work for you. Okay, so here's the 12x12 section. We include multiple different page sizes. The bulk of it is pocket pages with these photo and story pairs. And then we have some other different types of pages as kind of intro pages, some more kind of layout pages, which can be full layouts, or they can be more of like a magazine style layout, and some additional kind of introduction type fun pages as well. They're a little bit more decorative. But really the heart of it is your album, your pocket pages, and then whatever cards you're going to use. And if you have cards in your stash, great. Yes, definitely use those. You need between 60 and 80 depending on the size of the project you're doing. But if you don't have a lot of cards, I'm going to be sharing this technique, and this is what we're doing for my husband's album, where you can take a collection kit. So for example, the one we bought is from Simple Stories, and you can use the pattern papers and the embellishments to create your own journaling cards as well. And we're going to do a lot of hybrid journaling and mat those on pattern paper. So that is another option if you're not seeing a card collection that you like, or the one that has enough cards in it, or you don't have a big stash. That's something to definitely consider. All right, before we go to the next section, I want to check the questions here. Oh, thank you, Jennifer, a new member and already worth the money. Such a wonderful community, so supportive and engaging. We're talking about if you're using a D-ring album, you can always add more things later. Yes. You can even plan ahead and have more protectors in the spots that will go. You know, that's so true. You know, one of the ways you could do placeholders for later that are, you know, on your to-do list would be to have an empty page protector and slap a sticky note on it with that idea. But still giving yourself those boundaries of that's not part of this project right now. Prior to class start, is there a specific place in the community that we can chat and discuss about product and our plans? Yes. So inside the classroom, we're going to start letting students back in the next couple of days. But there's a whole activity tab, a whole kind of community feed where we can start talking about things, and I'll have the supply list up for you, you know, another reference to it, and the printable version of your timeline worksheet as well. So look for that in the next couple of days, and I'll send an email out when that's ready. So yeah, plenty of places to chat and start getting ready. All right, other sizes. 9x12, as I mentioned, that's the one that I'm doing for my husband's album. I wanted something that was a little bit more holdable on the desk, a little bit less unwieldy, if you will. And I've streamlined the number of types of page protectors. So definitely heavy on the pockets. And we're going to use this particular style, the 6 pocket pages. So we're going to have journaling cards here and then photos here. Super simple and streamlined. And then we'll also have some full page 9x12s as well, and I'll be doing a couple different things with those. Similar to the original one, we're going to use lots of 3x4 cards or a collection kit. And for this size, I'm recommending that you do 60. And that's just because of the number of stories per section. You have to do it in multiples. And that's what makes sense for the 9x12 size. 6x12. The availability here, this was one of the kind of original options that I shared, but the availability of 6x12 options is quite a bit different than it was back then. There's actually really only one manufacturer right now, that's Inked Brands, which does Studio Calico and Ellie Edwards. And they do sell through scrapbook.com as well, so that's why I've linked that here. But that's really your only option for 6x12, and it's a 4-hole configuration. So let's say you have an older We Are a Memory Keeper 6x12 album. You'd have to punch new holes in the new page protectors in order to get those to fit. So I have lots of notes on here of make sure you're paying attention to whole configuration, because there's a lot of different options, and you want to make sure the package of supplies you're buying, you know, fits together without having to punch a bunch of different extra holes. I'd rather have you cut down page protectors that have the correct holes than to have to punch other holes, because that can just be really annoying. 6x8 is the one that I've had the most questions about, because that's a really fun, compact size, and we figured out that it is totally doable. And I would say the one caveat here is to make it more doable, you need to choose 3x4 photos. And that's because for the pocket pages, we're going to be using this style of pocket. So the 4 up with 3x4s. So you may be totally comfortable with creating 3x4 photos, but if you're not, you may have to choose a different page protector style in order to get the 4x6, but you're just not going to be able to fit as many stories in the album. So that's something to really think about, and if you want some help kind of working through those numbers, we can do that for you. But I just want to say that this setup here for a 6x8 leads you towards 3x4 photos. And so it's going to be taking all these old photos and kind of reprinting them in that size. Yeah, we'll share in the classroom all the different ways that you can do that as well if you're not familiar. Same kind of product selection though in terms of the actual physical supplies. You're still going to need the 3x4 cards. It's a majority journaling cards. We only use a few filler cards in the whole project because this is totally based on those story and photo pairs. All right, and then I share other options. So if you want to do digital pages, you're going to need a similar type of cards. And of course, you can repeat cards. I have repeated cards throughout my album, but you're going to need digital journaling cards and then figure out which direction you're going to go, what size and format. You can use the Project Life app, and you can actually create an album that is almost identical to mine in the Project Life app. I actually have it set up in the app to share screenshots with you in the classroom. So if you're an app scrapper and you want to do something that's really authentic to the original project, then that's a really good way to do it. And then of course, and this has always been an option, you can create a photo book. You can use this entire structure and stop when we get to the scrapbooking part. And you can take all of these photo and story pairs and put them in a beautiful photo book and then have that printed. With that, you can then print multiples if you like, or just have this, a treasured coffee table book. And so it really depends on if you're feeling more scrapbooky or if you're feeling more, I just want to focus on the photos and the words and not even think about supplies. And I want to have, a nice kind of coffee table type thing to share in the end. So lots of options. We can lead you to any one of those. All right. Let's go back here to, we'll just go back to my head here. Hello. Why do I look disheveled from talking? All right. So Carol says, I've never done a 9x12. I think it'd be fun. Yeah. Wendy says she's loved doing a 9x12, but they're hard to get. That's true. Carol says one could cut 4x6 pictures in half. Yes, you could do that. And of course, there are the page protector styles that allow you to use the 4x6 in a 6x8. You just wouldn't be able to include as many pages because the album's just going to get too fat. But the idea of taking a 4x6 and cutting in half, there's plenty of ways, whether on your phone or on your computer, that you can make a little mini collage of two photos together, print those out, and then chop them in half so that you have 3x4 photos. So that's pretty easy to do these days. Yeah, no, I tried to create a variety of sources, and if you look at the supply list and say something's not right, or here's another source for you, just let me know, and I'm happy to add things. I want to make sure that, I had to order from two places for my husband's album, and part of that was the collection that I wanted to use. It was a Simple Stories collection that was already a year old. And it's just an unfortunate thing right now in scrapbooking is that the lifespan of supplies is actually pretty short. So no matter what collection that I pick, it's going to be hard to find probably by the time you take the class. And so that's just a challenge, but I can give you the recommendation that the Simple Stories collection kits work really well. A lot of the collection kits do these days because they include at least one sheet of those 3x4 filler cards, which are always really pretty. And we then can use the pattern paper in fun ways to make our own journaling cards. But I know many of you have really large stockpiles of original Project Life cards. You can see over there in those bins. I have those little shoe bins there that have all of my cards in them. I could probably do a whole project just from my stash, because maybe you've subscribed to a kit club that gave you pocket page cards and they're all very generic life or just pretty designs. So definitely source your stash first, because you can really move through a lot of supplies in this. So Alyssa says, I'm doing 9x12 for my project life this year, and I love it. I'm excited to do this one in 9x12. And Carol says, I suppose you have every pocket accounted for. I hadn't thought of that. Yes, I do. And so whatever size you choose, I'm going to have basically a worksheet for you to then help you fill in the blanks for what's going to take your brainstorming, and we go through multiple stages of brainstorming and pencil those in. But because there always are many people who adjust things to their own needs, you can certainly do that. But if you really want to use 4x6s, I would choose 9x12 or 12x12 for your album, or some sort of digital interpretation of it if you want to have the larger photos. Both in the 6x12 and the 6x8, we're emphasizing the 3x4 photos. Donna says, I have an All About Me album that I created in 2000 in the Creative Memory album, but I'd like to update it and add more stories. Can I incorporate what I already have done in this process? So, I'd have to see the album to give you a recommendation, but that's something that I'm more than happy to do. If you want to take some pictures and share them, I can kind of give you an idea. You might want to think of them as sister albums and think about what didn't make it in that album, but only do a time span of the last 20 years. But I'm happy to provide some input on that if I could take a see at it. And then Annette says, I think I might finally stop hoarding my Ellie Edwards story kits and use them for this project. Yes, this is a great use for all those cards that you have, particularly the ones that maybe don't have as many sentiments. Maybe they get skipped over, because I know when I'm looking through all my cards, I'm looking for some sort of sentiment that goes with the story that I want to tell. But for this project, it's actually really handy to have sentiment-free cards, like ones with nice little borders or just decoration. And so I would, if you're going through your stash, pick the ones that don't have any words on them and allow you to really use it for anything, because then you can just kind of mix and match and set everything up without worrying that the design is right. Because as you saw in my example, this is not a very embellished scrapbook. This is a scrapbook that looks really, really pretty and is also very simple. And that's because we're using this approach to help you get it done. Whew, oh my gosh, we've been doing this for an hour. How is that possible? Okay. I thought this might go 20, 30 minutes, but thank you guys. This has been so amazing. Can I answer any other questions for you? All right, probably don't need more coffee, but I'll take a sip while I wait for your questions. Oh, thank you, Toby. My hair is so beautiful. Thank you. I try hard. I've been wearing it curly for, 15 months now. Pictures may be hard for me due to age. That is one of the biggest conversations we have. So I back you in through these worksheets and exercises like the one we did tonight to selecting the stories. And then we have to go and find pictures. And nobody would disagree with me that that's the hardest part. But we talk about lots of different surrogate photos and being not so literal. That there's other photos that you might have that will work, and there's other ways to find photos. And we talk a lot about that. Some of the most interesting, rich discussions we've had in the various communities for this over the years have been about what are some other ways that I can visually represent the story if I don't have the photo, don't have access to the photo. And so we really kind of work through all those challenges. Because it's the hardest part. It is. And I know we're in the story brainstorming stage on my husband's album. And I know that, choosing the pictures is going to be a challenge, but we're going to get through it, and it'll all be done before class starts. So, all right. If you are watching live or in the replay and you have further questions later, I hope you will find me and ask. And if you want to know more about If you have any questions about the logistical aspects of the class, please feel free to ask that as well. I'm here to help you. I'm so excited about leading this session again and, bringing, some fresh modern life into this project with new supplies and seeing how we can use a collection kit to put it together instead of just already, pre-made pocket page products as well. Different size old photos, yes, we talk about that as well. How do you handle that? Particularly when, these pockets are all uniform. So we have strategies for dealing with that as well, both digital to hybrid, reprinting, as well as how do you include those in the album if you want. The albums that I've seen from this have been so amazing, such beautiful combinations. And then related to that, the next week's podcast episode 118, features 3 different members who've completed their albums. They have different life experiences, they're different ages, and they approach their albums in different ways. And so I think that will be really, really helpful and hopefully even more motivating for you if you're thinking about tackling this project with us. All right, with that, I will conclude for tonight. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I hope to see you inside the classroom. I can already tell there's a lot of you here who are going to be in the classroom with me, and I can't wait to get started on June 3rd. Again, you can head over to simplescrapper.com/story to read more and sign up, and that link to the supply list is on that page as well, and it'll be in the classroom for our members very soon as well, in addition to that. Okay, take care, guys. Bye.